All right, before starting, I actually wanted to take a moment just to wish my daughter Eden a happy birthday. It's her first birthday today, so she will forever be my best first-round draft pick. So say that. Always looking forward to draft weekend, Friday night. Adding good young players. With Martin, Alex, and David. We're excited about the talent and energy that they'll bring to those position rooms. I know our coaching staff is excited to work with them once they get on campus, and they're three guys that we think can really help improve our talent base across the roster. So we're real excited. We realize we have a lot of work to do tomorrow, because we have a number of picks on day 3. But with that, I'll open it up for questions.
You go through what you liked about David and how he fits into your offense.
Yeah, so we think David, it probably starts really with just his hands. We thought he has some of the best hands in this draft class. He's also very savvy as a route runner, just very nuanced and polished, and has the ability to separate. We think he's a guy that can really play both outside and inside, but we think that he can really make a living with his size, his savvy, and his hands, in the slot. But we're excited to get to work with him, and ultimately that'll be, Kevin and APP and CO's, decision.
Andrew, why did you think it was worthwhile moving down 24 picks to pick up 2 fourth-rounders?
Yeah, no, so, each decision in terms of trading up or moving back is largely based on the pool of players that we have on the board at that time. For us, that decision was made because we did feel like we had a number of players that were graded similarly. And I would say that even, in this draft class, we did feel like the sweet spot was more, mid to late second day and in the middle round. So it's really just how the board felt at some of the, some of the different spots that we were targeting. We felt good about the value and adding to the volume of picks that we would have this weekend.
The thought you can never have enough corners, is that an important one for you guys up there?
It is. No, it is. That's a position group. They're to some degree they're like race cars. It's when you have good ones, you really feel it in a positive way. And if you're banged up or you don't have depth there, we felt it, a number of times before where, you really are holding your breath from play to play. So Martin, a young, long corner who can press and play off, we were excited to get him there at 68.
Following up on that question about trading down from 44, did you come in to tonight hoping you'd be able to do that given what you said, or was there a player or two you thought, okay, if they're still there, we'll sit at 44?
We didn't consciously come in saying, hey, we're definitely going to trade down from 44. It was how the board fell for us. Now, that being said, we do believe in adding volume, whether in the present year or future year. So we'll perhaps always be a little bit more naturally inclined there, but we never go in with a hard and fast rule to say, hey, regardless of what's there, we're gonna trade out of the pick.
Are you disappointed you weren't able to complete a trade for Mayfield tonight?
No, what I would tell you, Tony, is probably the same thing I told you, guys beforehand, that that's a fluid situation. We'll deal with it day to day. My focus has really been on, the guys that we acquire who are going to be our rookie players in the next fall.
There were repeated reports out of Carolina that you and they were engaged in talks all night long. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I wouldn't comment on any discussions that we had with other teams. Like I've said that before. I also can't comment on the reports because I haven't seen them.
And just to complete it, just bear with me. Let me get it out. The report that the trade broke down over the amount of money you would be willing to eat in Baker's contract. Any reaction?
I wouldn't comment on any speculation in that regard.
When you watch teams trade up and draft quarterbacks, then do you feel like the possible landing spots for Baker are dwindling and it might be tougher to trade him?
No, honestly, like our focus is really what we're going to do with our own picks as opposed to necessarily what other teams are doing in the quarterback market. We had enough to think about on day 2 with the number of picks we had and the move we made. So that was really our sole focus.
Andrew, when you were talking to Houston about moving down, like, did that come up like 10 minutes or 15 minutes before? Or like, I'm just kind of curious the mechanics of that.
So what typically happens since the draft has gone to this 3-day format, especially if you're picking closer to the top of the second round, as everybody resets their board, there's actually a fair amount of conversation throughout the day. So we had a number of teams that we had discussions and potentially moving up or moving down. Quite frankly, Terry, and that was throughout the day. But then as the names start falling off the board, that determines the strategy for not only us but other clubs. So we had a fair amount of communication, with a number of teams really since the morning, and then obviously that carried through to, when we made a decision when we were on the clock at 44.
Andrew, this might be a better question for tomorrow, but this draft has been changing by the minute. Did you expect this kind of volatility and this kind of movement?
Yeah, you learn that every draft is unique. I think that this draft certainly has been, even more unique than others in the past. But it's great, right, the ability to have movement or have different opportunities makes it unpredictable, but it also creates chances to improve the team.
Andrew, what'd you like about Wright?
Yeah, so with Alex, he was really a favorite across the organization. Scouts, coaches, our research and strategy group. We like him because he's a player who profiles as what we call a big end or a strong side end. But with Alex, he has really the versatility to rush outside and inside. We love his frame. We love his ability to rush the passer. And this is a guy where when we brought him in for, a 30 visit, everybody just spoke glowing of it. He's very driven. He's very smart, very humble individual. And we think he's a player that can really grow into, the ideal big end for us and rush inside and out. So we're excited to have him. He's a perfect scheme fit for our defense.
Into this draft, you had mentioned that you take the big picture approach. Was this third round the quintessential definition of a big picture approach as opposed to immediate impact?
I don't know that I would necessarily classify it that way, Daryl. I think that in terms of big picture versus impact, I think with many young or rookie players, it takes time, regardless if they were picked, first overall or whatever the last pick is, 230, whatever that ends up being. I think at least how we maneuvered or navigated this draft, it was really dictated just by circumstances. One thing, if you're not picking at the top of the draft, you really can't dictate to it. So you really have to be flexible, adapt, and adjust, and ultimately try and stay true to your board and opportunities that present themselves. Because when you force things, that's usually when you kind of turn around and regret it. So we're hopeful that the decisions that we made tonight will prove fruitful for us, but we won't know that for really a couple of years.
You talked about Alex moving inside as a pass rusher. Andrew, what kind of run defender would he be for you?
Yeah, candidly, he has the frame to be excellent in that area, but we think that's an area where he can make improvements. We think that Alex shows the natural pass rush skill. He has the length, he has the size, and really as he continues to mature and develop physically, we would expect him to have the potential to be an effective 3-down player for us.
Or net proficiency have anything to do with you guys taking?
I wish I could say it did.
You talked about the excitement of being with Miles. How nice is it to have a guy in your building where you can just tell one of your rookies, go talk to that guy?
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We're very fortunate to have Myles Garrett, who's one of the best in the game, and can really model the the work ethic needed to be at the top of the profession. So young players in that position group are very fortunate, and we certainly don't take it for granted either.
I don't know what the odds were that your first pick of this draft would be a cornerback, given the strength of that position. So what's the answer to that question? Why did it end up your cornerback being your first pick?
Yeah, Tony, I don't know that I would have said that either. But candidly, I've told you guys before, we do look at it like we have an expansion team, and we try and take advantage of the opportunities that are there. Yes, there are preferences maybe going to the weekend where you're like, hey, it would be great if, we could select an individual at this specific position, at this specific value, but you also can't force it, right? And we feel like Martin is an excellent prospect for us at a premium position, and we're looking forward to having him in the building.
You just kind of touched on this, but would you be averse to going back to pass rush or wide receiver tomorrow on the 4th?
No, I wouldn't be averse to anything.
A guy I was just looking, Bell was so productive at Purdue. Why would he fall all the way to 99 or whatever?
Yeah, I think probably the reality of it is just, he didn't run as well as perhaps he had hoped, or, the league was. I think the reality of it is he probably didn't run as well as he hoped or, as expected in the spring. but highly productive player, has a skill set that's playable in the NFL, and we're happy to have him.
That Andrew, I mean, the speed seems to be the biggest question with him. Like, what makes you feel comfortable that he can still get open on an NFL field?
Yeah, I think that at the receiver position, there are a number of different styles that produce. Look, everybody loves speed across the field, but there are also fast guys that really don't have the route running ability to actually separate. They can run really fast, but everyone's pretty fast in the NFL, and there are also receivers that are bigger body types that have the ability to separate laterally or have the savviness to win at the top of routes. And so I think good receivers come in different shapes and sizes, and although David may not be the fastest player in the NFL, I think he has a number of compensating factors that would allow him to produce.
Usually when a player has a disappointing combine time, they do better at their pro day. He did not. Were your scouts, what was the report on what happened at his pro day?
I think we kind of going in, as we looked at David's profile, our expectation wasn't that he was going to come into the spring and run a 4.3. That's not why he drafted. So you kind of go in knowing, hey, here are his areas of strength as a skill set, and then the question becomes, okay, given what he does well, as you talk through it with your coaching staff, can we utilize those strengths where he can have an effective role? So even though he may not be the burner, can we use his size, his hands, his ability to separate at the top of routes? Is that something that's playable in terms of how we want to design the offense? That's really more how we go about it.
You mentioned slot receiver for him as a potential role. Mm-hmm. Did he do any of that at Purdue?
So I'd say we think he can play inside and out. Just because a player doesn't, play inside or he doesn't play outside, it's really more projecting forward, and we think he has the physical characteristics and, quite honestly, the mental acumen where he can do so effectively.
Drew, with you drafting Wright and Bill tonight, do you think that would affect the likelihood or chances or odds of you bringing back Clowney or Landry?
No, those any veteran additions would really be independent questions for us, Nate.
Andrew,
I'll get both of you, I
I'll
promise.
try.
Go ahead, Terry.
What jumped out at you about Emerson, and actually it's sort of the same type of question that I asked about Bell, because he looks pretty good on paper and that kind of thing, but he fell to the third round. So what were the strengths and what were the?
Yeah, we actually thought Martin has a pretty well-rounded game. He has, obviously has top-level size for the position. We think he's effective in press. But usually when you get those longer, bigger corners, they have like a level of legginess when they're playing from depth or in zone or in space. And you see less of that with Martin. And whatever you do see, he makes up for with his instinct. So we actually thought he had a pretty well-rounded game, press, zone, off, good run supporter. We liked him a lot.
So much focus is on like who might be there at number 44 because that's the first time you guys are supposed to pick. But when you look at it, you said the sweet spot might be later in the second round and the middle rounds. Does that mean when you're grading the guys that there wasn't that big a difference from maybe guys that were going around 44 to the guys you wind up taking in the 60s and 70s?
I think certainly for the individuals that may have been the best fit for our offense and defensive systems, there was maybe a little bit of a flatter curve in terms of the talent base. And that doesn't mean that there weren't really good players that went ahead of 44, went between 44 and 68. But we did feel comfortable taking that risk, given the additional picks we would be able to acquire.
And just how will you feel if you get to the end of the weekend and you still have Baker Mayfield on your roster?
You'll feel fine. Like I mentioned, it's something we'll deal day to day. Focus is really on the players that we can add to the team, and we'll deal with that situation as it progresses.
Andrew, how challenging though, as a GM, is the situation for you? Because the perception is not a lot of options. You pretty much need to trade them because you brought in 3 quarterbacks this offseason. The guaranteed money aspect and how you have to split. So from your perspective, I know you don't want to comment on reports and speculation and that, but just how challenging is this situation? It just feels like this was like the perfect opportunity to move him, and you might have to hang on to him now for a while.
I wouldn't say it's any more challenging than really a lot of situations that cross a general manager's decks. And I would say over the past 2.5 years, we've we've all dealt with a number of unique ones, starting with the pandemic. So it's comes with the territory in terms of dealing with different roster situations. I wouldn't say that it's unique in that regard.
Andrew, how much did Bell's performances against teams like Iowa and Michigan State stand out to you? And then another question about him, how do you think he complements Amari Cooper?
Yeah, so I mean, David has certainly risen to the occasion in big moments, big games against top level competition in the conference. So that that certainly stands out. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly stands out. In his case, David, I think is. I guess I think about it less in terms of complimenting Amari, and we really try and just get the best group of pass catchers that we can, given the constraints and given the resources at our disposal.
When you talk about kind of grading guys and how they fit in your system, how much easier is that now than it was 3 years ago? I mean, knowing Kevin better, knowing Joe better, and just kind of knowing what everybody wants.
It definitely makes it a lot smoother because even just thinking back, Dan, to the first offseason, you talk through it, you try and go A through Z so that you understand the vision that your coaches, your coordinators have for the team. But then there also is a element of seeing it play out over the course of seasons where you're like, okay, maybe how I thought about this was the wrong way, or okay, this is actually really how we're utilizing a certain skill set. So definitely with time, it does make it easier. It does make it a little bit more seamless.
The things that stands out with Martin is he didn't get targeted a lot in college. And so my question is, how do you grade that? And as you guys did that evaluation, from your perspective, just, why do you think teams chose not to go after him a lot?
Yeah, I think, Daryl, with corners, I would say with DBs in general, there still is a lot of information in plays where a guy isn't targeted, and he's targeted enough where you get a sense for his ball skills, and in those competitive situations, there's also a good thing at times where they're doing their job, but they may be doing doing something well away from the ball. And so when we evaluate these guys, it's not just following the ball and using those as the only relevant plays. It really is a little bit more holistic.
Andrew, I know Glenn talked about this when he was out here, but it sounded like you guys were kind of unfazed as these runs on receivers were happening earlier in the draft. Just from your perspective, what that was like and how you talked about it last week, gained patience in these last few years.
Yeah, I mean, the runs are always interesting, right? And I think for me, at least where I feel like I've matured, is just the things that you can't control. Like, there's no sense in stressing about it, and just realizing that you have to be adaptable and flexible in terms of how you navigate the day or how you navigate the board. And so, we feel good about the guys we acquired today, and we're looking forward to tomorrow.
For the draft overall, not for you guys, but seemed to be a lot of parity. There were a lot of picks that a guy was picked way ahead of where grades were at. Did you get that sense with this draft?
I think that may speak to maybe how the talent pool flattens out over the course of the 3 days, where there may be in certain stretches players that are considered very similar, but how they'll be valued in a certain organization or a certain offensive defensive system may swing wildly. Because the reality is that when you get to day two, you're getting to individuals who may have a few more weaknesses than the ones who go in the top 10, and depending on what those strengths and weaknesses are, may be a better fit in one organization versus another.
Is there anything to the thought that the COVID year made the middle and back of this draft deeper than it normally is?
I'll be honest. I've heard that theory. I haven't given it a whole lot of thought, so I wish I had a intelligent answer for you, but I really don't.
How do you gauge when to trade up? Like, for instance, tomorrow, you guys got a lot of picks, so you've got plenty of ammunition if you want to get aggressive. But just in that moment, how do you, and there's a guy that you want, just what's that like as far as, having that feeling of, okay, I better make a move here to go up the board rather than come back?
I think it's a couple different factors. Certainly the overall talent level of the player, the position, and I would say the scarcity of the position, and then really the acquisition cost, right? The cost of the actual trade. And when all those things align, whether it's based on needs or what you're trying to do on that particular evening, it makes sense to make the move. But the reality is, if any one of those things don't line up, whether it's, hey, there's depth at the position, or hey, this maybe doesn't make sense for us to expend this resource for this particular player, or the talent isn't there, or hey, all these things line up, maybe we have a trade in the works, and then it disappears because of how the board shakes out. You really can't do it. I'll share this with you, dear. I was telling Peter on the way down, I was like, all right, do we only make one trade tonight? Because you have so many conversations every time that the clock is approaching about going up or down. I was like, oh man, it was only one movement on the board. So I think that's actually pretty typical at every NFL team that I've been at.